Shatterer! Commander, do something!
Oh, now I'm the commander. Everybody out.
This way!
Well, so you guys asked for it. Today, I'm going to be talking about the story in A Star to Guide Us, which is a kind of video I haven't really done for Season 4. And those of you who watch me very closely will know why already. In fact, I produced a fairly long SoundCloud mini pod of like 20 minutes long talking about it. But essentially it's this. The releases are so huge and epic and immense now. There's no way to consolidate everything that's fascinating and cool about them into a single 20, 40, even hour-long production. As you guys hopefully are well aware if you're playing. I still love the story and have been geeking out, but it needs more long-form content to be done justice, which is why you've been seeing me do the really long, detailed, in-depth versions of it on the streams, and eventually you will have some really high-quality gameplay ones coming up once we catch up to where the plot currently is, not due for a few months. But in the interim, I thought I would at least give you some kind of video about my preliminary thoughts and general takeaways of some of the coolest bits. So this will not be a moment-to-moment, every little bit of voice acting and detail recap and summary for you guys, but it will give you an idea of what some of the things were that I was really captured by, and I'd love you guys as you listen and re-explore this patch with me today here in this video to tell me about some of your big moments too. So let's get into it. A Star to Guide Us. Wow, there's a lot to geek out about. I guess we'll go in chronological order as best as possible. So the release opens with us in Vabbi again. In fact, it zigzags us back to Vabbi on more than one occasion this release. As you guys know, I always like it when the devs do that. It makes the core maps that came with Path of Fire feel like they're a little bit more trafficked, and when it makes sense to go back to an earlier area, we're at least doing it. And even cooler this time, we go back to Vabbi right after having defeated Joko in the previous patch, and we spawn in at the Vitendi Academy, which was this major hub of schooling and propaganda about how Joko did all these wonderful things. So you walk back through that area, seeing him lay claim to having defeated Zaitan and seeing him lay claim to taking out the mouth of Morgemoth, knowing that now he's gone. It really leaves you wondering, what will this nation be like now when so much has been manipulated for so long and this guy's just disappeared? Which is really something I think we were all expecting this patch to wrestle a lot with. And then it kind of goes bonkers off the wall in other directions too. So the new map as well, when we get there, opens at the Chantry of Secrets, which doesn't really play a prominent role. They don't talk about the Order of Shadows involvement with it, the Order of Whispers involvement with it much. There's a hidden thing where you can kneel at one of the statues. But it's still cool in that you kind of walk through with Bram on your mounts, traveling through this new area, the Jahi Bluffs, and you get all this great history looming in around you. It's probably complete coincidence, but I love that we're just thinking about Joko, then we're moving through in this new map, and you get this big, domineering, intimidating statue of Balthazar there too, being one of the other great antagonists we were dealing with recently. Path of Fire has so much story debt and different things tangled together, and this patch deals with those three main antagonists, Joko, Balthazar, Kralkatorrik, really well, and part of it is just because the world itself oozes details about these great characters that were in it and influenced it. So that whole sequence, by the way, is amazing. Remember how when POF begins, you get on your raptor the first time, you break out of the mine and you walk across the sand dunes and you see the desert in all its glory? You really get that experience with Bram here as well. The devs have like gazelles galloping ahead and alongside you as you walk and see all these lovely places. All the dialogue timing is set up just perfectly so that Bram never interrupts anything he's saying. You can go kind of at max speed and it will be fine. Just a really nice opening into a new map. Even comes out of a cave, which, as you guys know, I always enjoy. You go into a cave and then find a new area of the world. Brilliant stuff. So we also then immediately go to the Fortress of Jahi, which if you've watched my other video recently on the map itself, you've heard me geeking out about. It's a beautiful, grand, great fortress. And the idea here is the various factions here in Alona are now convening to discuss how to move forward. So you got Sunspears there, you got Mordant Crescent there, you got Generic Awakened, I think there, you got Order of Shadows there. Everyone who has a stake in the future of this continent now that the ultimate leader is gone. So there's lots of politics, lots of opportunity to speak to side NPCs. Everything's flowing really well. You always know who you can speak to and who you can skip. Some of the dialogue was really intelligently done too. Like, people there were still suggesting that Joko would come back. You know, he's indoctrinated, he's made people believe he's that powerful and will always return for so long now. It just makes sense that there would be these naysayers there still saying Joko's coming back, this is ridiculous. And you actually get to hear that from the people. So, of course, the Mordant Crescent attempt to ambush us, which makes sense for them. They do one of these scary moments where they take complete control away from your character and you're not really sure how it's about to go. Is everyone going to get slaughtered? Is Oreen going to save us? Who knows what? And then Koss comes back. Oh my lords. So Koss is a big part of this patch and seems to be a big part of the story going forwards. Let's talk about that. In episode 1, Koss was introduced. And we knew as an Awakened he could potentially be a part of the story. We saw at the release of Path of Fire, Talcora had returned. And at the time, I liked seeing Koss, but I wondered if the devs would just do a small glimpse at him. And then we sort of would ignore him there forwards because it's not kind of Guild Wars 2's duty to constantly keep nodding back at the original characters. And as always, whenever something exciting is thrown on the table, like, wow, Koss could become a main character in Guild Wars 2 as well as 1, I always kind of get a bit scared these days and feel like it's out of scope and feel like, you know, maybe they won't do it. Maybe it will just be a little thing, a little treat in episode 1 and we won't see Koss again. But of course, now Joko is destroyed and all the Awakened have regained their sentience, their freedom. Sentience is probably a poor word. And so it's been something we've talked about many times leading into this release. Hey, will Koss have a bigger role? Because now Joko's gone. He can leave that cave. He can do what he likes. And I've been refined and thought maybe not. But the devs did it. They brought Koss back, and you know what? I'm really happy with it. The devs are basically showing time and time and time again this season that all of these little things I'm cynical about that they won't go into because it's too unwieldy, it's too difficult to do, they don't have the time, the resources, the finesse for it. They say, no, we are going to do it. It makes sense. It's kind of one of those things. Koss was introduced in Season 1. All the facts of his existence right now are established, and it makes sense that with Joko gone, Koss would return to the fore and he would do things in this continent. You know, they've opened the box. You can't close it again. They have to tell the story that would be most natural to tell. What would happen in Alona at this point? Koss would come back and be a hero. And so they respect that and they do what they have to do to make it what happens in the story as well. You know, they don't try and wriggle out because of scope or whatnot. So Koss comes back and it feels natural and perfect and amazing. Not just because I'm geeking out because he's a Guild Wars 1 character, but because it made sense. And they give him that hero's entrance where he saves us from the Mordant Crescent. And it goes even further than that, right? One of the people at this meeting is a character called Kossan. So Kossan was associated with some dynamic events in the Desolation and was very much a tertiary character, I would even say, for the main Path of Fire story about a year ago, where you noticed that one of Koss's descendants was actually still around. And that was like the original little nod. Oh, look at Koss. He's got descendants around here. This is cool. But Kossan also is a hero in his own right. And even he's in this patch. So not only do we get Koss comes back, we get Kossan in the spotlight as well. And the two of them like interact. The game gives the time to have the two of them meet and talk to one another about, hey, yeah, you're my great ancestor. And they go off to discuss things. Like every little thing you'd want to happen and think should happen, happens. And who knows what role they'll have in the future patches. I'm starting to become much less of a cynic, honestly, over Season 4. Because when I see time and time again they actually do it, you know, not in my wildest dreams, when Episode 1 came out, would I have believed that they would have added this random character, Kossan, brought him to the spotlight, brought Koss to the spotlight, and did all the big beats that they really could have and should have done. And well, here it is. So yeah, just truly fantastic. Really nice instance, and of course the instance ends with the Shatterer returning. So this is the death-branded Shatterer, and we get a whole slew of other brilliant things here. The opening instance of this release truly impressed me. So we get to see the Shatterer comes back, but he's a bit different, and we're fleeing through the fortress as he slams his way through the walls and tries to kill people that you're saving with special action hotkeys. It feels brilliant. It reminded me so distinctly of any number of other RPGs and games I've played where they'll have like a type of enemy, right? And then in the sequel, that type of enemy will return. And you're in the new game and everything's really exciting and you're wondering how the graphics for that enemy has now appeared and manifested in the future. You know, like you're playing Halo and the hunters look a certain way in Halo 2 and then the hunters look a certain way in Halo 3 and now you're playing ODST and you want to see how they look a bit different. I felt exactly the same there with the Shatterer. It was like I was playing the sequel to Guild Wars 2, but but because of the Shatterer here, who looked different and had all these different mechanics, and there was so much other stuff going on from when we last fought him in Blaze Ridge Steps. And that moment, I kind of sat and reflected on it and thought, wow, you know, it's not a sequel, it's just Guild Wars 2, but that's how far the MMO's progressed at this point. It's actually giving me those experiences. So you flee from the Shatterer, and what else, guys? What else would make sense if the Shatterer was in this patch that you probably would be cynical they wouldn't do because it'd be out of scope? Well, okay, probably the coolest thing would be that the Vigil are tracking it, and Almora, who friggin' hates Kraukatoric, and Almora, who should have had a bigger role in the story so far as well, would probably be involved too. Wouldn't it be cool to get a lot of Almora here? Well, guess what? She's here. They do it, like, straight away. It's what makes sense. It's what would be cool. And she comes in. She's got a lot more dialogue. I think last we saw her was, like, Bloodstone Fen last season. And not only does she have a lot of prominence here in this instance, she has prominence out in the open world map too. You get to see Almora herself taking on the new Shatterer in a similar way to the old one was taken out in Blaze Ridge. It's just perfect. They do all those little things. And the instance basically comes to a close with one final big twist. And that is to do with the reality of Tyria right now starting to deteriorate. So again, it's one of those things I'm cynical about with Scope, where essentially, what have they established? 2 Elder Dragons are defeated. Magic is supposed to be going crazy and in limbo. Now, during Season 3, we saw a lot of the effects of that. The explosion at Bloodstone Fen, the anomalies, all that kind of stuff, showing the kind of chaos that can be unfolded when magic gets out of whack. We even had Morgemoth himself talking about denying the Elder Dragons is to embrace oblivion. Don't do this. The ley lines, all of those aspects of the game. But then that all kind of stalled so far. Through Path of Fire, it kind of stalled. We had the bounty boards and the unstable magic, yes, with those, but they didn't progress things much. But nonetheless, what is the core story ArenaNet are trying to tell right now? Killing Elder Dragons is bad. There will be consequences. But what consequences have we seen? Not many, you know, the crazy magic, but it's been kind of refined. What is this true oblivion Morgemoth is talking about? Well, sure, I'd like to see real oblivion. I'd like to see planes of reality deteriorating and absolute chaos unfolding, but it's out of scope, so the devs won't do it. They'll have to be a bit refined and delay that. No, 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 this is Season 4, baby. They're actually doing it. So, at the end of this release, you see a giant rift appear in space-time that the Shatterer flies through, and it's like one of these cool moments, like Ara story mode, where the airships are all flying around. It's ultra cinematic. He warps in, and you realize all number of crazy things are going to start happening. Kraukatoric, the Elder Dragon, has escaped into the mists. The Shatterer is flitting around in there. Oreen disappears, and the way that, I mean, look at this on the footage here. The way they present it to you graphically, you can even see the Kraukatoric inside the rifts if you look very carefully in the map. It really shows they're going gung-ho with it. Who knows what the hell the next upcoming episodes or expansions will be like, because they've really blown the lid off here now, and they've said, no, this is the story, that Oblivion is falling on Tyria, so let's show everything deteriorate and all the myths start blending together. And so the instance closes. That's just the opening to the patch, and it was at this point on day 1 I actually stopped because I went to go play the Mythrite Gambit, which I'm still in the middle of actually recapping all that story with you guys. So, then you get to explore the map with the next part. Much of this I've already kind of discussed when I was talking about the Jahi Bluffs, but the theme is that these distortions in time and space are opening. Some areas will start snowing, some areas will be set in the past. There are 3 in particular you're going to go to for the story, and we should dive into those. So number 1 is called the Displaced Towers, and what the devs did here was something really cool. You can tell how this meeting went with them. They said, okay, so we're doing the story to the point where any number of different periods in time and space can appear. What would be some cool ones to show off? And they probably wrote up some cool ones and decided on their favorites. One of them was the Displaced Towers, and I have so much love for them for picking this, because it is ore set in the past and at a very specific time in the past. So just choosing ore in the past is already a really exciting and thrilling thought. We've never seen ore in its prime, back when the Oriens tended to it, back when even the gods walked among it. We have hints of it, of course, from 2012 and when it's corrupted by Zaitan and whatnot. But this is like ore in its prime, kind of. Obviously, they don't have the time to make a whole new asset set and city building stuff just for one tiny little remote area in the Jahi Bluffs. So it doesn't look as good environmentally as it could, but I'll forgive it because they picked such a cool period of time. It's not just ore in its prime. It's a section of ore at the Vizier's Tower, which is a jumping puzzle you guys should be familiar with from the Straits of Devastation, which has so much cool lore there already. But also, they've picked it right when it was being attacked by the Char. And I love this because the assault of the Char on ore is a really big facet of the world building of this game's history. It's a large plot point that never before, not in bonus mission packs, not in Prophecies, Factions, Nightfall, Eye of the North, Guild Wars 2 at any point have we ever actually seen depicted on screen. And so it's one of those big things that only real lore hounds truly know about and think about and talk about. So I want to see it in game at some point. And here it is. They picked that exact moment. So you get to see the Oreens fighting the Char. And they go even further with it as well. If you are a Char player character, you are unable to fight your Flame Legion allies. You can only fight humans. If you are a human character, you can only fight the Char. If you're the other three races, I think you get a mix. Actually, apparently, if you're a Norn, you're not allowed to fight humans either. So what is that? Some subtle suggestion that the Norn fought alongside Oreens way back when? I'm probably going a bit deep with that. So what a great idea. You get a bit of their dialogue, and then they go even further and give you some lore books and extra information. There's a jumping puzzle for mounts there to climb one of the towers. You get some interaction with a poem that Traherne supposedly once loved. And we never, of course, in the core story or Heart of Thorns or Season 1, hear Traherne talking about an Oreen poem. But it makes so much sense, right? Traherne was a scholar of ore. Of course, he would have known and loved various Oreen poems. They talk about... it's a general poem that seems to be describing that sense of a call to arms, whether that's to war with your enemies or they personify darkness and whatnot. And Traherne knew the poem, but not the very last line, which is presenting the idea that you don't fight to break away from something, you fight to return to it. We did a whole long section on one of the streams this weekend talking about this poem and what it might mean. I'm not too great with literature, but it was really fascinating to see that and, just get that extra information. I described this back in episode 1 when they started adding lore books, that it means they can do poems, and it means they can do flyers and pamphlets and stuff, and all these little things add to the world building in incredible ways. We even get to speak to Taimi. Just hearing about Traherne a little bit more, I appreciate. We'll see a reference to Scarlet this patch as well, and, it's all stuff to make the game feel like a cohesive whole, as I continue saying. That's becoming a bit of a catchphrase for me at this point, right? So, yeah, the Oreen area was just fantastic, even being able to see right down to the Vizier's Tower. Mysteriously missing is the smashed up Massart bust. So I wonder if the devs are saying something with that. But you even get a note from the Vizier talking to King Razor right before he enacts the scroll. And you see that he's not a pure cartoon villain, but he's actually a bit conflicted. In a way, he is doing it for king and country. In another way, he's doing it because he's been manipulated by Abaddon. All these big ticket items, they're there, right? So that's just one of the three. Another one of the three? Question mark, question mark, question mark. It's an alien planet, an alien landscape, presumably still from the realm of reality that Tyria exists within, but another planet. And a planet with life, because, we're seeing fungi and stuff there. You go in, you get all this crazy post-processing, bobblehead tonics, you get visions of all kinds of prominent characters from the past, including, as I just mentioned, Scarlet. There's a cool adventure that you can participate in there. Not too much tangible, really, to speculate on. But, again, it's like you can tell they just had that list. What's a really cool thing we could visit? Another planet. People have always heard about another planet the humans might have come from, blah, blah, blah. Let's go to one, even if it's in this weird little enclosed way. And they do it, Lastly is the jungle anomaly, which isn't such a lore bomb. Not every single one of the three had to be a big lore bomb. But this is the Maguma jungle just dumped into Jahi Bluffs. And from a technical standpoint, it's magnificent. It feels just like that expansion, an area that maybe you've never seen before, how they do the boundary between hard jungle scape and desert with all the verticality in the jungle and the flat plains and terrains and mesas of the desert is just wonderful, right? So, and obviously that was a great excuse for them to get the old ley lines in. Cool bit of the patch where you get to wander around these prominent areas of Jahi Bluffs and get a lot of detail from Taimi and your allies as you go. The next instance is to do with reclaiming the Sunspear Sanctuary. And I honestly could say that by the end of this reclamation instance, the patch could have been over. There's been so much meaty stuff already in it, and by the end of this instance we will see that they could have just ended it there, but really we're only at the halfway point. And we'll see whether you guys agree with me in the comments on that. So you go to the Sunspear Sanctuary with Koss, who obviously knew it before when it was the Sunspear Refuge. And the idea is we use it as a defense against Kraukatoric and the spreading of the brand. At this point in the story, you find that Kraukatoric is actually hunting Oreen. Everywhere Oreen's been, Kraukatoric's looking for her, trying to eliminate this potential threat. And so we need to find a safe place for us and our allies to build some kind of resistance effort. Koss explains that after Nightfall ended, Cormir, in her capacity as a god now, actually provided enchantments and magics to defend the place, linked with these fires. Now, the term divine fire does not appear in this story instance, but I cannot help but be reminded of some stuff way back in Season 2 that I really felt like the game needed to look back at, and they kind of did here. So the idea is, remember, these divines, these gods, have some capacity to resist dragon stuff. And that was something we were dealing with in Season 2, where we did the fake ascension ritual, when we got the divine fire. And remember, in the north of the Silver Waste, we went into that dark cave, lighting our way until eventually we found the remains of some exalted stuff, and we found out about Wynn and all that stuff with Kaith. That was divine fire resisting Mordrum corruption and whatnot. And well, now we get, and I wish they'd used the same terms, a very similar thing here. We're illuminating the darkness here with our big divine fires, and we're protected by the god magic. So I like that the devs did that. I think that the idea is that it's not all powerful and it won't be 100%, but it's pretty good. A similar thing to how they've expanded on what the Djinn can do in this release as well. The instance itself is pretty cool. You know, you are lighting it up. It's nothing like we speculated pre-patch, where it was a long, slow thing like Guildhall's might have been. You know, it's dark and full of cobwebs. By the end of the instance, you've illuminated the place and got rid of the spiders that are there. The boss fight you deal with there is fantastic. It actually picks you up and carries you around. A mechanic, I believe, only raiders have seen from CM Doom at this point. In the core narrative, I can't remember how many times we've seen that. But yeah, this spider will actually eat you and run off with you. You get a lot more character development with Bram as well, and he even becomes like kind of a funny character. I think that the devs are doing really well to melt away that aggression the players felt towards him. You know, where we find out he really doesn't like spiders. We're working with Koss. We reclaim the sanctuary. And the big stinger really is, once you're kind of stable here, another large rift opens outside. You travel towards it, and really here comes the big conclusion to this whole Bram arc. Out of this rift to the mists step two familiar characters. Air and Snaff return. Wow. What a moment. So, we haven't heard Air's voice actress for a long while now. Air obviously was the big thing that set Bram off on his like big emo, edgelordy, antagonistic ways, and he gets to speak with his mother here. And what the devs are doing is something really profound. They're expressing to us that many of these heroes who have died in the past are out there in the mists continuing the fight as spirits. Now that everything's breaking down and we have an elder dragon in the mists, it's called a lot of them to action, and they're doing things. So it's not like we're seeing a vision of Air from the past or some gimmick. It is Air. It is a fully cognate, sentient Air, dead as she may be as a ghost, who can only visit our reality for a short time, but is busted out of the mists. And we hear all this incredible stuff. So just on the Bram side, first of all, this is obviously the developer's opportunity for him to speak with his mother, come to terms with her death, and even have her offer him some advice. And you'll remember, we didn't really get many scenes with mother and son before, so it was, you know, well needed, actually, I think. What I really liked about this, as a bit of a geek myself, was how much Air talked of family. You might think, well, that's a bit of a cheesy thing to talk about, and I agree, but hear me out. What really ticked me off with the whole Bram arc, being, you know, antagonistic as he was, wasn't that I failed to appreciate the devs wanted me to dislike him. I know the devs wanted me to dislike Bram. I know they were trying to create that fracture between us, and successfully so. What frustrated me about it was that it didn't make sense why he acted in the way he did as a Norn and also as a member of Wolf. And that's what irked me and many of us other, you know, sort of loreheads about it. It's that the devs were writing him as a human, and even in most of the discussion about it online, they were justifying his grief and his reaction as a human, and that's what's always frustrated me about the Norn. They're so much more interesting than humans and should be treated differently. So one of the big things was not just the Norn aspect, but as a member of Wolf, it is unlikely that he would turn his back on his pack, on his group, as we were at the time, Dragon's Watch, to go do all of his solo endeavors and whatnot. And so then here, when he gets to speak to Air, and we've come all this distance, where we've had several moments over this season between us and him, Air actually re-emphasizes all of those wolf perspectives and thoughts and feelings. And when Bram, at the end of the patch, is finally sort of saying sorry, it's those that are lingering with him. And that's the nice little thing that really brought me around, because that felt like the devs kind of fixing, to an extent, a blatant mistake from back when. And overall, I think the arc was pretty cool. So, that's not all, though. All right, let's just talk about the fact that there's another guy here as well. Snaff! Okay, Snaff. Wow, what a character. Anyone who read the second novel will have known all about Snaff and will have got a lot of value and appreciation out of Destiny's Edge way back in those early days. Snaff is mentioned constantly throughout the core story, constantly in the subsequent follow-up stories as well, but he's always been such a weird position of being a character we never really met or was properly represented in game outside of various cutscenes and whatnot. Well, here we go. We get his voice acting, we get to walk alongside him, we get to see how our fellow Asura Timey geeks out. Now, I don't know if the devs are doing this, but the player character mentions, wow, it's Snaff and Air. They mention Snaff first, like Snaff is the more interesting one. I wonder if you're a Norn, the player character reverses those two, or if you're any other race, they reverse the two. But as an Asura, we respect Snaff that much. I haven't verified that, but that would have been such a cool moment. And Snaff was the real show stealer for me. Snaff was the one that I was really happy to see, to check out his gear and stuff, see what he sounds like. And you might also be wondering, why are they here? Well, here's what's bonkers about it. They are coming specifically with a message from Glint. So the devs, like I say, they've just blown the lid off. They've said, all right, if we're going to establish that Snaff can still be a part of the story, that Air can, even after their deaths and in a limited capacity, why can't Glint? Wouldn't Glint be a hero that's still fighting out there in the mist too? And she is! And so they do this whole thing, this whole story where we don't see it, but on the other side of the reality in the mists out there, Glint is mobilizing this army, and she's trying to take out Kralkatorrik, and the fight goes on. It didn't end with Edge of Destiny. And she has a capacity in this patch. We don't really see her, not truly. They do some like spoofy variations of it, but they do other clever things. Like they have Glint telepathically communicate with us in this patch. And you might wonder, well, how do they do that? What, with a cheesy like reverbed voice effect coming into our ear? No, they like use Squad UI with this floating disembodied message that is presenting itself to you. And that's like Glint communicating. What a clever idea. Like, this is what happens when the writers and the devs and everyone, like, understands the product and what it's capable of. Using Squad UI for that was genius. So, yeah, Glint is actually giving us advice. And this instance really ends with Glint saying, listen, you got to go for this. You've got to tell Oreen that her job is to defeat Kralkatorrik and replace him. That this is the way it's got to go. And so we speak to Oreen. And the patch this is still the same instance. This is why I said this could have been the end of the release after this. We get a big cutscene, which is essentially ripped from the movie Doctor Strange, right? Where Oreen is starting to realize and utilize her gift of prophecy. She is her mother's daughter, after all. And so we tell her this is the plan. She kind of has this moment where she sees all these different visions of the future, all these shards. You may remember if you watched my trailer analysis, one of the lines from there appears now. And she keeps seeing our fights with Kralkatorrik, and in all of them she's dying over and over again. And you can actually freeze frame and pause on each of them, and you'll see like different circumstances each time. Sometimes we're doing the fight in Ascalon, perhaps where Kralkatorrik woke up. Sometimes it's here in the desert. The original shot shows a cast of characters we may not recognize yet, and those are characters you recruit for your cause later as the patch goes along. So anyway, she sees all these visions, and it seems bad. Like, none of them are working. And then she just leaves. She just flies off. So the idea seems to be, going forward, that she may have seen the one way through, and now she's off to pursue that. Or that because she dies every time, she's scared and leaves. And do you guys see why it's so powerful and important? We got all of that stuff with Vlast in POF. That Vlast stuff was not a dead end. All that posthumous story we got and all of his thinking and understanding. We see how flawed and hurt and scared and wild Vlast got without good direction. Oreen is the same. She is just as fallible. And so now at this point in the story where she's gone, we actually, because of what we knew about Vlast, we're not 100% confident that it's because she's got a plan. It could just be that she's scared of dying and has left, you know, and feels alone. She doesn't want to be in this fight. She doesn't want to help these people, much like how Vlast in some capacity ended up feeling. So it's great to see how POF is properly, you know, those seeds that were sown are still influencing the narrative as it stands right now. So, yeah, Oreen leaves and we're like, okay, Glint's plan's kind of bad. And here's another amazing beat. We're the commander. And we have thoughts and feelings and initiative and we get stuff done. And you know what? Glint's got a plan. It doesn't look too hot right now. What about our own plan? And I love this. We take some initiative. We take our fate into our own hands and we say, no, let's try something. So the commander hatches our own plan. We ignore Glint, essentially, with Blish. So Blish, who, by the way, every patch so far is becoming more and more and more likable in a very short space of time, extremely well characterized. Blish steps forward and he says, I got an idea. What if we get Kralkatorrik to eat some powerful magical thing, but we put a tracker on it so we can find out where Kralkatorrik is at all times, and at least this way he won't pop up out of nowhere to hunt Oreen. Maybe we can at least do that. And we say, all right, Glint didn't ask us to do it, but that seems like a good idea. And that is really now what the rest of the patch is. They could have left it on a cliffhanger there, but no, we continue along. So here's where we decide on our magical artifact to pick. We actually go for Balthazar's Greatsword. So this is not Sahothin or Magdea. Perhaps a tier above them, if you will. Balthazar's own greatsword, but that exploded in the dramatic fight with him at the end of POF. So here, do you see how we had a lot of stuff about Joko and the fallout of Joko and people thinking of his return? We had a lot of stuff about Kralkatorrik. Now we start focusing on Balthazar here as well. By the way, I missed a great line a second ago. When Oreen does flee, there's a beautiful moment where one of the villagers freaks out and says, oh, not even the dragon will fight with us. Oh, what do we do? You know, all those little lines that they have the various characters doing is just brilliant. The way that they have like Blish move and stand on top of a pillar is also great. But yeah, so now we move into Balthazar oriented stuff. We go back to where we defeated him at the Hanging Sky Gardens again. Zigzagging back to Vabbi. The devs do a clever thing with the scouts and map UI, a bit like I praised last year with the Choya scout that you can see up in POF, where we kind of figure out where the sword might have gone based on the explosion. You go to reclaim the swords, only to find, in the next instance, that someone else has got it first. And it's a pretty simple little story they're telling here. It's a priestess of Balthazar, someone who loved Balthazar, someone who saw Balthazar for all the good that he brought to the world, someone who appreciates that Balthazar's plan was to kill Kralkatorrik, and we did all that stuff to stop him, only to find ourselves now trying to defeat Kralkatorrik in a major way, right? It's just... It would be so frustrating to be a follower of Balthazar and see your god be defamed, to be debased, be destroyed by people who didn't even fully, truly understand what he was going for. Balthazar was even pretty closely aligned to us, and that's what we did. Now, in truth, it was more nuanced than that. He was pretty murderous, and he was doing all kinds of other horrible stuff, and I think it was justifiable what we did. But, you know, that's what the Joko monologue was about last release. We've come across this character who's defending Balthazar, and it's so important to see that. That's the kind of closure that I really wanted this Living World season to offer, so it doesn't feel like, oh, we just kill an antagonist and then it's it, that's it, it's done. 4 episodes later, we're getting some real resolution and conclusion to that side of the story, and we're remembering that maybe we made a mistake with what we did with Balthazar there. So that's the premise of the instance. Gameplay-wise, it's really cool. It's a Deadeye that's trying to snipe you down, and you've got to hide behind cover. Utilizing, trying to stay out of this death fog. You're actually at the old garrison, not the Fortress of Jahi, but the garrison, the Argon garrison at the same time. So there's all these beautiful little moments, and what you ultimately do is, yes, reclaim the Great Sword, and you actually recruit this person to your cause. You don't kill them, and you say, hey, you can come with us. They don't seem to like us whatsoever, but they've joined us, and I think that this may be a new character we see a lot of in the future. This is one of the people we saw in one of Oreen's visions, and, you know, this is one of the many little characters you actually end up bringing into the Sun's Refuge as a new gameplay feature for this release, which was nice to see. So, with all of that done, we reignite Balthazar's Greatsword with the help of Ritlock and Sahothin. Made me think of Magdea. I was so hoping to get some Magdea reference in this release. We didn't in the end, but just a reason to have Ritlock there. They even do some silly jokes about how his fur is so soft because when we were hallucinating, we said we really liked it. I want Ritlock to stay badass, please, ArenaNet. Enough of the little jokes. I don't need him saying, oh, I do think my fur is soft. All right, let's keep him as a cool guy, please. But yeah, so we reignite the sword, and the plan is to go to the mists, hook this tracker onto the swords, and bait Kralkatorrik, the Elder Dragon himself, to us to eat it. So we are hurtling to a situation here where we may, in a Living World release, see an Elder Dragon again. Hasn't happened since Draconis Mons and Flashpoint last season. And because of Draconis Mons and Flashpoint last season, I was fully ready to see Kralkatorrik again. We go to the Mists. It's big, it's beautiful, it's a lot like in Path of Fire where we go to the Mists and it feels super grand, except there's warring going on everywhere. It's chaotic now. You can see Glint's forces in this struggle against all the other stuff that's going on, and our plan completely fails. So returning to this idea, we ignore Glint and try and make our own plan. When we get in there, Glint's saying, no, this is wrong, you need to leave, don't do this. And the sword kind of becomes too unwieldy for us. It rebels, it like starts exploding and firing at us. It doesn't work, and we are forced away. We don't even get to see Krauk, really, as far as I'm aware. You kind of get some odd glimpses at Glint, but not too much. It's super cinematic with like Shatterers and things flying around nearby. But we're forced to leave, and because of the disaster, Blish is forced to stay, and that is his exit from the story. He is destroyed in the Mist. So that's the big tragedy of this. We have a beautiful moment where we have like one of these other mount race sequences. You're leaping on the raptor in a low gravity environment across these enormous rocks. Just look, if you're alt tabbed right now, look back at the YouTube video and tell me what you see, all right? This is the reason you should be playing this stuff now. This is the quality we get in these releases. Some obscene escape sequence where finally we return to Tyria with a man down, and we've lost the greatsword. I mean, Christ, what if we kept the greatsword and used it against him? The patch concludes with some sorrow over Blish, which I very much actually was into, because I really liked Blish. Also, his brother, Gorick, grieves in a really cool way, with, you know, how they handle the audio and the dialogue timing and his denial. And you can kind of see what they're doing here. It's not a totally needless death, because what it does is it drives Gorick as a character forward a lot. Gorick, up until now in the patch, did have things to do, but he was more interested in the bugs and insects and stuff. He leaves. I am curious if, coming forwards, we will find that they can just download Blish's matrix into another golem, like he has a backup somewhere and he might not be fully dead. But I'd also like to see an actual deceased character here, especially now that they've opened this idea that Air and Snaff and all these spirits and things can still interact with the story. It might be nice to have just a nice, clean, clear death. But looking at some of the early Asura personal story stuff, we had similar things going on. I don't know. The idea that he's immortal and it's just a golem body, you can destroy the body and re-download him elsewhere. Like, that's the magic of us becoming immortal robots, isn't it? He's on a hard drive somewhere, on a crystalline matrix, and we can just import him onto it. And maybe Gorick runs off and we'll see Blish comes back next patch. The cast of characters is getting really huge now. But because of stuff like the Sun's Refuge as a gameplay feature, I think they can actually balance it. And we'll see how they go going forward. I'll have a video on the Sun's Refuge specifically where there's a ton more dialogue and you can continue interacting with people like Koss, Kossan, the characters we meet. But that, I think, will have to be a bit of a separate production. And there you go, guys. Those are my biggest takeaways, really, of this release. I truly adored it. I think the devs are doing really well with a lot of their little aspects. This feels like so much better than last release, which mostly was only really good at the end because of the Palawa Joko cutscene. There were other great moments of value, obviously, but this release just kept hitting. The opening instance had big moments. The exploration of the map had big moments. The claiming of the Sunspear refuge had big moments. They were all great. Even the most refined, single-minded of the instances where we're against the Deadeye was still such an important subject material for the devs to deliver. I couldn't help but leave it feeling giddy. Hold on, I almost forgot. I'm only remembering because I'm looking at the footage here while editing. Yeah, a big bomb at the end as well is Taimi's degenerative condition is flaring up again, and she's prompted to say it because of Blish's passing away. So she's on some kind of, you know, countdown clock, and we're supposed to be really sad and scared. And, you know, that was the end. That completely slipped my mind. I guess that shows how much I still care about Taimi, but that was a thing too. So there you go. That's my geek out. Complete fanboyism. Very little criticisms to offer. And believe me, we've only scratched at the surface. Please do keep an eye on those other formats that I will be producing where we really get every little detail. I could give you guys like an hour and a half of discussion on every little instance. And one day I intend to. Next weekend's streams will be a full playthrough over on Twitch. And when the LP catches up, we'll have full proper deep dive gameplay videos where every little moment is delivered to you all. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks very much for watching. And I will see you for more topics and discussion about the patch very soon.
What? What is this?
You'll never take us, or we'll stand strong!
Did they say or? Commander, what are you seeing?
It's a war between humans and Char.
You mean like the Char invasion of war? The one that happened centuries ago?